Welcome to the Simply Real Life podcast. I'm Sarah, the founder of Simply Real Health, here to help you simplify, amplify, and elevate your life. This show is for those of you who want the real talk on how to live a more intuitive and intentional life, a life that's healthy from the inside out, and one that feels more effortless, aligned, simple, and more alive. We cover it all, from health, wellness, mindset, motherhood, daily habits and rituals, to business and relationships, creativity and growth, and tiny tricks to feeling your best, and the energetics behind it all filled with personal stories, unfiltered conversations, and of course, answering all of your burning questions, all in the way of simplicity and keeping it real, so that you can create your own version of your healthiest life. Let's do it. Hi guys, welcome back to the show this week. I hope that you are having a really great December and hopefully a holiday season that feels peaceful and at least aligned to you and your values and the way that you're wanting to spend time and the way that you're wanting this season to look and feel. And if not, it's actually a perfect time because we're like halfway through the month to pause and reevaluate some things, and always knowing that you have the freedom to change stuff, to take things off of your calendar or off of your list, and really getting clear and super honest with yourself about the things that actually matter. I think it's also a really important time to check in with yourself in general, like how are you feeling health-wise? How are you feeling food-wise? How is moving your body going? How's your sleep going right now? Does it feel like there are any parts that maybe need to be reprioritized a little bit? Because I know for me, sometimes this time of year, it's this whirlwind and it's so fun and there's so much going on and most of it is really fun stuff. But as always, and with everything, like when that scale feels like it tips too far, then it actually starts to feel depleting and stressful and not how you're actually wanting it to go or intending to go. It's a perfect time this week, as you're listening to this right now, just ask yourself that. How are things going? Are things feeling the way that I want them to feel? If not, are there any changes, adjustments, shifts I could make, things I could take off my list, out of my mind, off my calendar? And just know that you can always do and try things differently. Like you don't have to be stuck doing things the way that you've always done them. I find that particularly helpful in times like this where we're so used to these ingrained traditions and the things that we always do. And sometimes that can feel a little bit stifling as you continue to learn and grow and you're always evolving as a person. And if you have a family, your family is always evolving and growing too. And so just to feel that sense of freedom of like, hey, we could adjust some things. We could try something new here or mix it up or maybe pick the things that everybody loves the most and finds joy in and maybe try some different things for the things that don't. So just a reminder, if you feel like this season is feeling like it's getting away from you or you're not feeling great physically or mentally or emotionally, that it's the perfect time, I think, before things pick up in the next week. And then they tend to hopefully quiet down after that for the last week of the year. Anyways, it is a beautiful time. It's a magical time, but I think we do have to be extra aware of what we're doing and why and staying present in our bodies, like checking in with yourself daily, probably multiple times a day. I find because there's even so much more different types of food and different types of drinks and so many maybe more social events than usual, that it helps to take that hot second of a pause before just automatically doing something because other people are or because it's there or because it's what you have always done. So this time of year, I feel like it's a perfect time to practice that. And other than that, I hope that it's been amazing and warm and wonderful and cozy and happy, joyful and peaceful. That's my hope for you. So in today's show, I wanted to talk about how I wrap up the year, like the things that I specifically do and carve out a little bit of time for. And this is not, of course, in this week or next week if you celebrate Christmas. This is about the end of the year, after the frenzy, as it gets into that last week of the year, how I approach that last week and give you some ideas and things to think about or reflect on. It's such a beautiful time to celebrate in the beginning part of December, the first 3 weeks probably, or when the most celebrations are. And then how I shift that energy for the last week of the year. And this may look totally different for your life and your schedule, but there is a very intentional shift, I think, almost like an energetic shift that happens after the holidays. And our brains and our bodies naturally want to think through like, okay, what are the next things? And I may be different than what you're thinking I'm going to say, is that my approach for that last week of the year is not about like gung-ho just moving forward and on to the next thing and writing New Year's goals and intentions. It's not at all. It's actually the opposite. So I'm going to get into that today. Something that I really try to do while we're still in the holiday season is have some element of giving or sharing and making sure that truly is the spirit of the holidays. And so what ways am I teaching my kids that? What ways am I doing that myself? That sort of sacrifice giving, whether it's time or financially, if you're able to, or it's with items or different things that we just like think outside of ourselves a little bit. So I always need that reminder to have that be incorporated in some way. The second thing, it's like an actual intention of mine to do something new for each holiday season. So like new recipes in particular. That is a big thing where I'm like, I want to try at least 2 to 3 different recipes, whether that's healthier holiday cookies, or I'm looking at something that is nostalgic or that I loved growing up, or is one of my favorite memories around the holidays, or one of Kyle, my husband's favorite memories growing up, and start to think like, how could I upgrade that tradition so maybe the ingredients are slightly better, or it's something that we can pull along, but as we're pulling along into the next generation, hopefully that it's something that's getting upgraded along the way. It also just helps our brain to be trying some new things that we don't get stuck in the same, but being willing to try and test and be open to different things. I think it just keeps it fresh for the holiday season itself. So after that, that's really what I want to spend more of the time on, is like, let's say after Christmas. I don't really consider New Year's. I know a lot of people are like, okay, from Christmas all the way through New Year's, time doesn't matter. You're in this time-space continuum where you're just eating all these leftovers and not really doing much, but you're not really being productive about things. Let's say you're just in that holiday mode all week long. I'm more of a fan of keeping them separate, where there's like a full week in between them. It doesn't mean one thing needs to bleed into the next. I find that I just don't feel good when I do that or have that mentality. So what I like to do is just after Christmas itself is make sure that I am carving out some time and some space for rest time, open-ended time, downtime, time where it's not super planned, super structured, but that it's centered around this concept of rest and starting to turn inwards for the winter. That's really like what the winter is about. And it feels like after Christmas, after all of the fun and the joy and the excitement, then our bodies are craving this sort of internal turn inwards, and we go inwards in our minds, and we need time and space in order for that to happen. Like to truly check in with yourself and see where things are landing. We need that downtime and sometimes that recoup time after a very busy season. And I know that this is not always possible. I know if you have kids, they're not in school usually and they're home, but I find that it's just a different rhythm than any other time of the year. And so taking advantage of that in any way that you can. Like for me, we close the Simply Real Health office. We are pretty much offline. There's not any big things happening. I take that time to do a big social media break, which I would highly encourage if anybody wants to do that with me. We're even going to pause the podcast for the next 2 weeks. And I'm hoping that that gives everybody just a little bit more bandwidth. So being more with family, with close friends, rejuvenating your body, sleeping more, just relaxing. But I, for myself, find that I don't pair that with the behavior and the mentality of, oh, it's all just a wash. Like it's all a holiday week. It doesn't matter. It's more like I'm doing my normal routines, eating great real food, staying active every single day. And it's like a different rhythm. But I find that I need to mentally prepare myself for that shift that happens right after Christmas. Otherwise it can feel sad, this like letdown after all this energy and time. And I mean, man, as a mom, there is so much that goes into the holidays, and I'm so glad that I get to do that, and I love it. If you don't love it, that's different. Then you should maybe ask for some help and get other people involved if you don't love the holiday and creating these memories for your family. And I love that stuff, so I find a lot of joy in it. But I have to mentally prepare myself for that transition time. Like, transitions can be tricky because our brains can start to go off on these random tangents, and we feel completely out of our routines. Our brains are not quite sure what to do. So it's like we just fall into these modes that don't actually help us. So I think it's a combination. It's like a combination of you're back to your normal things that are healthy and supportive and life-giving to you, but also with that through line of just rest, like rejuvenation, and taking breaks from things that are maybe not as necessary, but that you might fall into doing during that time of year. So that's my plan for that. I also really think through what are the ways I want to stay active in that time, because if I don't have a little bit of structure, it's like I could just fall into doing what everyone else does, which is just lounging around all day, eating the leftovers that don't make you feel good, keep on eating the cookies just because they're there. Making an active plan of what sounds fun, either with the weather, that could be something outdoors, skiing, sledding, snowboarding, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing. If you're maybe going to a warmer climate, like, are you taking walks? Are you doing hikes? If you do, you can do hikes in the rain. I mean, we do it all the time here in Seattle, but having a plan or like a couple of maybe bucket list items for that last week that keep you active or keep you healthy, or trying different restaurants that are open and finding some good healthy options. I think it's a great time to do that. Do things a little bit differently just for that week. The next thing that I do, which is kind of a random funny thing, but I always do let me back up. I was just going to say something that was 100% not true. It was like I wanted it to be true in my mind. What I did last year, which now I will be continuing on because it felt so good and felt so special and like a legacy thing for my family. Last year, I sat down and I did the family photo book for every year, at least since my son has been born. So he was born in 2018. So I had quite a few years, which was like, as you can imagine, thousands and thousands of pictures to go through and sort and upload. Last year, I spent so much time on it. It was ridiculous, but I finally found a service that was helpful. And I'm sure there's a bunch of them out there, but I've tried at least 6 because I've tried to do this project so many times. But last year I had the most success. I printed all of those books, like 18, 19, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 6 different albums. I was so determined to get them done. And I used Chatbooks, which I love. I am pretty sure we have a code for it now, so I'll put that in the show notes. But it made it easy because I could start and stop, and I could do it all on my phone. While we were watching a movie or something else, I was working on it on the side, and it would save my place every time, which I feel like the other systems and apps I tried to use, it's such a nightmare. It crashes your computer, it slows things down, and then it doesn't save your work, and then you only have to be on your laptop. And so whatever. Chatbooks, I'm a fan. I'm going to do it this year again. This year I only have 1 year to get through, but it was such a sweet gift that the kids love looking through. And I love being able to process the year like that, processing the year through photos, because I tend to take a lot because of my job and what I do. And I also really enjoy it, capturing those little moments, that it really helps me start to review the year, but do so in a very lighthearted way, where I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all the things that we have done and all these little memories that we have, or the random daily life moments that I know, especially having young kids, that are so fleeting, that I just want to capture and have in a place always, hopefully always, that nothing happens to these books. But it also just felt so good to get them off my phone, because Lord willing, nothing happens with the cloud and storage. But it was something that I feel like I will always treasure, and taking a little bit of time that last week when things are slower, or I've made a little bit more time and space, I just love doing that, and I'm going to keep doing that. Okay, so this is not in particular order, because this is something I actually do first, kind of starting now. mid-December, and it's specific for me because I own a business. So any of you entrepreneurs out there will also feel me on this, that it takes a couple weeks of wrapping things up on the back end of your business. There's just a lot to do, a lot to organize, a lot to look at. And even though I do it throughout the year, and at least once a month I'm in there with all the financial statements, I call it the CEO days, that there's a lot that is required at the end of the year in terms of taxes and planning. And something that I love doing, and this is something that will probably be useful for you even if you don't own a business, but is looking at the end of the year and looking through all of the things that I had on my calendar, the commitments, the projects I was working on, the things that got completed, looking at everything and using the principle called Pareto's principle, which is the 80-20 rule, that basically 80% of your results come from 20% of the activities that you're doing. So you can think about this in a context besides work, if that doesn't apply to you, but like the 80-20 rule, 80% of the results in your life are a result of 20% of the actions, activities, things that you are doing, which means that there is a lot of stuff that you are doing and spending time on that is not really moving the needle forward. And so I just love that exercise of looking through things in my business. What did I spend the most time on? Was that a great use of time? How did that pan out? What things were a waste of time? Like, I really do try to do this calendar debrief specifically with work. And I also do this with my personal life, along with wrapping all of the work stuff up for the year. Then I start to move into the personal stuff where I look at my personal calendar and I'm looking for all the different things I said yes to. So different commitments, social commitments, date nights. I'm looking for family adventures. I'm looking for trips. I'm looking for different appointments I had. I'm looking for all the different workouts that I did. I'm looking at everything that's on my calendar, and I have everything on my calendar. So maybe this would not work for you if you do not use a calendar where you're actually writing stuff down and have schedules and appointments. And what I like to do is look at all of those, both in a work context and then on my personal calendar, and write down this yes column, like that was 100% so worth the time and effort and energy. And sometimes maybe that's because it was like financially very successful. Sometimes it's emotionally very successful. Sometimes it just brought you so much joy. Like, there's a lot of reasons it could go in the like 100% yes column. And a lot of that might align with, and hopefully aligns with, your values and the ways that you want to be spending your time and the ways that you want to be feeling in your life. Like, get a clear list going of what those things were that were such great uses of your time and energy. Then second, making a list that's just as important to that is making a list of the no's, like the things that when you look back, you're like, that was a waste of time, a waste of energy. It didn't go anywhere. I can't really say it made a difference or an impact, or it drained me, exhausted me, sapped my energy. That could be with people that you're hanging out with. It could be different projects you took on, maybe in your home life or around your house. It could be trips or anything that you have planned in your life or said yes to. It's so important to look at the things that was maybe not worth it, because then you have this genius no list for moving in to the next season and moving into the next year. And I think if we don't do this, we end up just repeating things because we're not aware, we haven't taken the time, we're not really intentional or mindful about it. But if you look and you're willing to do this little exercise, you will find these nuggets of gold that you're like, oh my God, that's kind of life-changing. And then to be reminded, you have to put the no list somewhere that you can see it clearly, that when new requests come in on your time, you can vet it against that list. Is it something that I actually learned was not really worth it? Then I'm going to practice saying no, declining, not doing those things in the next year. And I think if we can do that year after year, you can imagine how those ratios start to switch around the things that are most fulfilling, like the ways that you're spending your time and your life. I mean, we don't know how long we each get on this planet. And I really feel like if we're not aware and taking notes and observing and being able to reflect, that we just end up repeating the same things and we end up being exhausted and tired and drained. And a lot of that can be siphoned off in a different way so that you have more time for the things that do matter. And that's really the whole point of this reflection is where are those little sinkholes happening that you may not be aware of? And then once you're able to patch those up, think of all the hours and the time that leaves to be doing the things that are more on your yes list. So again, this can be done in a lot of different contexts, but I do think this is one of my most favorite things to do during the end of the year, because you really start to intake the year on the whole, not just what's happened in the last month or two, but on the whole. You start to see a lot of growth year after year in doing this, but also growth from maybe the beginning of the year to where you sit now, today, which I think is just really cool. Okay, on that note, this is like another mini tangent to that, is that I write down like what were the biggest lessons I learned this year. Like when I've gone through my camera roll, I've gone through my calendar, I've gone through the big highlights. Sometimes I will go back through my journal too, like what was going on? My journal has all the mental stuff, like all the stuff I'm working through, to then be reminded what were the biggest lessons this year? The things that either kept getting handed to me over and over again that I couldn't seem to learn the lesson that I finally did or that I am now, or the things that came up during the year and the ways that you walked yourself through that process. I think it's so interesting and especially helps you cultivate this mindset of every year you are constantly growing. Every year you're constantly learning and learning more about yourself and growing and evolving. And what a cool thing. It's like nobody gets to the end of the year and they're like, that was just perfect in every way. Everything was easy. It was all just a breeze. That's just not realistic. Maybe you aren't really actually reflecting on things if that's true. Or maybe it is true. Maybe you do have one of those years, which yay for you. Okay, the next part of this is that I write down 25 things that I am proud of from that year. And these can range, and they do range so wildly from, yes, the big things, the accomplishments, like the things that you do feel most proud of right off the top of your head. But then challenging yourself to do 25, it forces you to dig deep and really start to excavate, okay, what else? These could be like the tiniest things. A lot of them for me are these internal, very small things that I maybe haven't even shared with anyone, like even my husband. They're just like, for me, little things that I am proud of, and that sometimes even sharing them, you would feel a little bit vulnerable, if anybody saw that list. If you feel up for it, sharing that list with someone you love or your partner, your spouse, like is so cool. And then being able to share it together if you both do it, because you can see the inner workings of somebody else's brain and like the things that they maybe have been working on daily, or just, it just shows so much growth, I think, and progress. And I think you'd be surprised, like the nitty gritty small things that you're like, no, but I'm actually really proud of that. That could be in your family life. It could be personal. It could be with your health. It could be with work. It could be in your marriage. It could be with anything, like forcing yourself to write that down. And I think this process is extra cool when you've had a couple of years of doing it too, because then you can look back and see and be like, wow, there really was a lot there that I can and should feel really proud of. The point in doing this is that our brains will not acknowledge the things that we have done or that we do feel proud of or that we like have accomplished, because your brains are always moving on to like what's next. It's like scanning for the things that we're missing or that we don't have yet, or it's looking for the lack. But in doing this exercise, it really forces your brain to acknowledge all the ways that you have grown and you have learned and you have like progressed in a lot of different areas of your life. And unless you sit down and do that, your brain is not naturally going to go there. Like maybe you could think of 3 things off the top of your brain of what you're proud of, but actually sitting down and trying to come up with 25 is like a challenge on another level. I think that just gets into a different part of your brain. And I am going to share all these things. If you're like frantically taking notes, I will be sharing all these things in my end of the year blog post. I do this every year where I talk about like how I wrap up the year And then also we'll do another post about setting intentions for the new year and what that looks like and the types of questions I ask myself for that as well. So if you're trying to write notes and you don't want to, just know the last week of the year, we usually publish that post so that you can see it, or you can look it up on the blog again too. It has all these different questions, especially on the reflection of the year before we jump into, okay, what's next for the next year? Okay, the last thing that I do and try to do to wrap up the year is just plan something fun for January, February, and March. And again, this may be season dependent and where you live, but where I live in Seattle, it gets dark at like 3:00 and it can be rainy and cloudy, dark and dreary for most of the day. So you really do have to actively prepare to be making your own light, to be making your own fun, to be making your own joy. And so I think about, okay, well, I probably want to plan some type of trip, whether that's a one night overnight, whether it's a weekend trip, whether it's a trip we're taking with our family, maybe to go see the sunshine. This is a huge priority for me because I know that being just in full winter, I am not in the healthiest mindset if I am in that for months and months without a break. And again, a break, even if you cannot afford to go away somewhere, of like some sort of activity, filling your calendar with a night out with friends, or planning something fun to do with your girlfriends, or maybe it's going to go get a massage, or it's planning dinner with other families that you love or other couples, or you're doing a date night. There just has to be a little bit more to be looking forward to for me. And so again, this may be completely just personal to me, but I find that if I have things that I am excited about, and for me, I love traveling and especially love the sun. So combining those two things, it just gives me these things to really be looking forward to, especially in the winter. And it's just like a good break in the routine. So I think anything that really breaks up your routine can be fun. Like even finding those apps that show the hotel deals the night of, where you can get these crazy good deals and stay in your own city overnight. Or maybe you switch houses or condos or apartments or wherever you live with a friend. It's just like a new environment, something new, different. I just think it's a great time of year to be thinking through that, so that, again, it's all about this transition from the fun and the excitement of the holidays, and then moving into that transition week, that restful week, that recuperation week. What do you want that to look and feel like? Then starting to reflect on the year. It's just that good time to get cozy and internal, but then also plan some fun things ahead of time. So the last thing I will say about this time of year and this time of transition, specifically after Christmas is over, is that I am not somebody, you might be shocked by this, I am not somebody that's like January 1st, like, oh, okay, let's go. Let's write the goals and intentions and ready to go January 1st. I'm not. I've tried that, I think, many different years in a row. And I think over the last 4 years, I've really started to appreciate just a slow, gentle roll into January. Like, it is still a time of reflection, of getting a little bit of extra time and space. It's a time to be gentle with yourself, and there is no rush. When you look around, when you're on social media, when you are looking at your inbox, there is so much noise around the start of the year. And if you love it, don't let me take that from you. Love it and go for it. But for those of you who always feels this harsh change and this harsh switch where you're going from one person into this entirely different person and you're trying to change 6 million different things at once, if that really hasn't worked for you, or if it makes you feel overwhelmed or anxious or stressed, or that you're really not feeling prepared, like, try this on this year of just slow and gentle. I really planned this for the first 2 weeks of January for sure, where I'm like, no pressure. Maybe we'll start blog content that first week, but probably the second. It's like we all just need a little bit of time, space, just a little bit more intention, kind of like absorbing all that has just happened, and then slowly walking yourself into the new year. And I think that this maybe starts with that last week of the year for me is not this long excuse to just be eating and drinking like the holidays are still going on, but it's that slow incorporation of your non-negotiables and drinking enough water and moving your body and eating vegetables every day and starting to work yourself into these really good habits that are sustainable and that are really tiny and small, but that's the things that matter, and that's what adds up over time. It's not this flip of a switch, January 1, all of a sudden you're drinking green juice and green smoothies and you're cooking every meal from scratch and meal prepping. It's like, can we start to incorporate some of those things slowly, gently into our daily lives, no matter what the day on the calendar is? That's really how I choose to live. It makes things easier and less intense and less all or nothing. As you know, like especially on this podcast, so much of this comes back to that cultural norm of all or nothing and extremes. And so as much as possible, for me, it's finding those moments or the times of year where maybe it's super tempting to want to do that because everybody else is doing it. It's sexy. It feels appealing, maybe if you really have not been intentional through the holiday season. And it perpetuates that, that mentality pretty much all throughout the year. What I'm just here to offer you is like, maybe there's a different way where it's not so extreme, where you can take care of yourself and there's not these massive swings between feeling really good and feeling really crappy that you have to then work your way back up to it. That is so mentally challenging to do, by the way. It's so hard to start working out when you just haven't been doing it at all. It's so hard to start eating healthier when you haven't been doing it at all, versus incorporating that into your daily life, into your normal rhythms, because you know that you are worth it. You are worth taking care of yourself. You are worth eating really good, high quality food. You are worth moving your body. You are worth taking care of your mental and emotional states in your nervous system. When you know that you are worth doing that, you don't really want to be taking days off of that. You don't want to be taking days off of the things that make you feel good. So it's just a different mentality. And I think because of being able to go slow, the slow roll into January is one of the best gifts that I give myself. I think especially because I am in the wellness industry, which is an industry that really does most of the time perpetuate that extreme, the quick fix. Like, let's do the 30-day plan. Let's do the juice cleanse. Let's do all these extreme versions of things. Versus this is my version of rejecting that. And my version of like, let's go slow, let's go gentle, let's incorporate these little tiny things that add up over time. And that I want it to feel like my normal life that feels sustainable in every day. And not just because it's the beginning of the year, but it's because that's how I want to treat myself. And that's how I want to take care of myself. So take it or leave it. That is my approach. That's what you will see me doing, taking the next 2 weeks off the podcast, the blog, the newsletter. We will publish that blog. Don't worry about this process at the end of the year, just so you have something to refer back to if it's easier to see it like all written out. And then you can save it for a time that feels good to you. But you will see this slow roll into January now that I've told you about it. You'll probably see what's going on behind the scenes. And oh my gosh, it has made such a difference. I feel like how I walk into the new year, where I'm like, okay, I don't have to have everything done January 1st, but maybe that first weekend, Kyle and I will set aside time to go through kind of like, hey, what are you thinking about? What things are you focusing on this year? Like, what things do we want to do as a family? Looking at all those different life buckets, areas of your life that you're wanting to be intentional about, and starting to put things together of what that looks like. What do you want it to feel like? This is very similar to the Fall Intentions podcast that I did this past fall. And so just starting to think through that. There's no rush. It can be something that is thoughtful and intentional, and I hope you'll try it with me because it is, I don't know, it makes such a difference to how you feel and enter the year. And I think that has a big indicator on the rest of the year. Your approach to how you're beginning this season can be a very similar way to how you approach the beginning of each season, and taking the pressure off of it having to be an entire year at a time. It's good to do all the dreaming and all the visioning and what you're really wanting to call in. I think that's beautiful. But also, let's also think through, like, just for this next season, like, what do I want that to feel like? What do I want that to look like? I hope this was helpful just to get some new ideas, some things you maybe want to try this year. And I think overall, giving yourself a lot of grace and as much space as you possibly can, as much rest as you possibly can, as much quality time with the people that you love as you possibly can, and taking off the pressure and the extreme change of season between the holidays and the new year, and just go a little bit kinder on yourself from the inside out. Let me know if you're going to join me in that. I would love to know. And I hope that the rest of the holiday season is peaceful and magical in all the ways that you do want it to be, and full of rest and the best memories and the best ways that you feel like you spend your time and love spending your time. I love you so much, and thank you so much for being here and for listening and for asking these amazing questions. And I just can't wait to keep going and see you in January. If you enjoyed this episode and want more like it, make sure you're subscribed to the Simply Real Life podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe share it with a friend or two. That would mean the world.